In the beginning, I want to clear up something about spiritual consciousness. If you're truly spiritual, there's a lot of confusion, no matter how spiritual you are, because we have to communicate with mortals, as it were, with people who are not involved with this heavenly grace. It's because we're literally in another universe. We appear to be in the world, and we work for many years, decades, to make ourselves smaller and more amenable to human sensory equipment, as it were. So I bring that up because I know that's a condition in every spiritual person I've ever known. It's very difficult, the interface between human and spiritual consciousness. It's like the difference between spirituality. The other day, a dear friend of mine wanted me to smoke some marijuana, and I tried to explain it just haphazardly how it affects your consciousness. It's not any drug, alcohol, which I'll enjoy on a Friday night. There's always a distortion in spiritual consciousness. I use myself as an example. There are millions and millions, hundreds of millions of truly spiritual people in the world. And what's being said right now should help that, because we're in another universe. It's wonderful. It's decent, it's kind, it's true, it's pure, it's permanent, it's fixed in the heavens. And you know that. And the idea of communicating with people in the world is the reason we're here, to help lift each person in their sense of dignity, understanding, wisdom, their closeness to the Almighty, because there is a God, this very nice person that we call God, who's infinitely more pure, more decent, more wonderful than we can ever know. And every now and then we'll see someone who lives in that space and makes it in this world. My friend Susan, who put that book together, After Time. It's a divine work of art. And I think somewhere in that book, this is why I'm bringing it up today. I saw it this morning before walking in here, that we live in another universe, though we appear to be in this world. Now you have to work on that on yourself and the way other people perceive you. You have to very gently take control of a conversation. We're teachers. You first listen. And if you learn to listen well, you can open up anyone, no matter where they are in their state of existence, short of a true psychopath or someone on methamphetamine, I guess. But even in that, I found it in my capacity to communicate with someone when you open your heart up truly. And then you are in the healing area they talk about in the scripture, all these miraculous things, but they're not miraculous. There is a God everywhere, every instant. But if you start healing people and doing these things that all spiritual people can do to different degrees, but it's not done, you don't do it, you know it's not right, because then people will think God is here to help you in your life. No, we're here to become more spiritual, more ethereal, more ephemeral, more like my friend Susan, just quiet dignity, nothing good in their life, all the dear spiritual people I know, and yet they, with great dignity, move forward. So with great dignity, we move forward in our understanding our personal capacity to be immaterial. In other words, we are not our body whatsoever. They're the idea of past lives and so forth, and as we've discussed before, we're all on a trajectory. If we have something to produce in this world at this time, to uplift it in some way, and it goes over geologic time. It's not just decades or centuries, it's eons, ages. And when you get that sense, that's like part of your meditative experience. You sit quietly, you'll drift through very fine realities, very refined. and you'll drift and drift. And all of a sudden, you have a shudder of, you can see and feel and encompass many spiritual universes. There are many universes. They're all spiritual, except this world, this place, this seeming universe. And as big as it seems in the cosmos, we can travel to different star systems. There are way to move light years. All that's part of the illusion. It's fascinating. Everything that's fascinating is the devil, Satan, Mephistopheles, and 5,000 other names in our daily vernacular. All the bad names of people. Sociopath, psychopath, whatever, the control freak, the one that sees you coming. That's the world, but it's infinitesimal. In Buddhism, everyone is taught this day one. The Dhammapada, the first 10 rules are, that everything starts in the mind. So if you know how to quiet your mind through deep meditation, reflection, or one prayer. We all felt this, that I'm the same person. I'm simply speaking as a voice for hundreds of millions of spiritual people, because I know this is happening around the world with hundreds of millions of spiritual people and the whole world, because there's one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord God is one. It's one God in consciousness. It's not rules or laws. It's that, in a sense, of the rule and the law is to let go of everything in your consciousness and to see Him, the only God. I'll move quickly on to the next point, is that God sees us as God. It's unimaginable. It's not in the way of someone's religion. It's a reality in consciousness. It's like falling in love, or when I see my friend Susan, I consider a holy teacher. I was so glad she put that book together, but I always looked at her like, you're supposed to be doing what I'm doing because you're a better person. There are people like that in the world, that are good, that are true, that are wonderful. And I hope you're one of them, and I hope I'm one of them. Because the truth is, we're not here. This is not here. And when you get very quiet, you'll see that, and it's a fineness of love, and not the urgency or the passion of love. There's a very endlessly dispassionate purity in love. It's like when you look at my friend's grandchild, Georgia. It's like there's just joy and happiness. The joy and happiness that my friend Pedro puts together next door here with when you have, dozens of little children running around and playing and completely disciplined and enjoy, and that innocence and joy you get from birth that you brought from the other side is still intact when the children are disciplined to understand, to respect one another, to honor, to listen to one another. It's quite a joy. And when my buddy Pedro has his classes right behind me here in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a complete education for anyone at any age. Someone like that who's very spiritual can discipline people in such a fine edge, with respect and under any conditions. And I'm simply saying how hard it is in this world to discipline one another, to respect, to listen, to be with one another. But when we understand what's being said in the beginning of this talk that we're having together, is that if you understand the idea in Eastern philosophy that the world is an illusion. When the Buddha was enlightened, he was to have said that, and his first disciple, when he put his finger up, asked him what the truth was, and the Buddha just put one finger up, which meant there is nothing, no one, it just is. He simply said, you will visit the house of your illusion no more. This is a very, very refined comprehension. That's why my buddy, I didn't want to touch marijuana. It's like, because it ruins the wondrous sense that all spiritual people know. And of course we have to hide out at home or where we can, or take long walks in the woods or whatever when we can, or work out all day like Master G does here, Greg, the martial arts master. It's something, if you're spiritual, to keep you in that place, that wonderful place that allows us to identify with the transcendent. The transubstantial means beyond the body. As we've talked about in the beginning, the entire world and everything in it is the illusion. So for listening people, we're meant to just lift whoever we can, whenever we can. That's the job. Whatever we do, our day-to-day living, it just kind of happens. We move with the rhythm of the earth, and we can't even explain it, but it happens. You know, the everyday melange, the everyday details, that you just simply do it. And it's a nothingness. I do these things day to day, helping other people, their lives, and so forth and so on, and do my work, but I can't explain that it doesn't exist in me, in my consciousness. I'm speaking again for hundreds of millions of spiritual people so that we can all identify with what's being said and move through this transition as quickly as possible so that the other side, which is God, which is the only, can reside here and through this place forever. That's the whole idea of religion and truth, isn't it? To walk away from the world made and seen to our God, unseen, unmade, the unmanifest. The unmanifest, God has never been in the world. So words like that are used in the Buddhist scripture and in all throughout the Bible. You'll see it. But it's so clear and so mystical. You can read Psalms or Proverbs, and all the great truths I'm speaking about right now are stated throughout. It's one scripture, one truth, one God. It's quite wonderful to know Him, the only God. It's quite natural. And why other things are confusing and unnatural, and you know, you live in a dispassionate calm that you have to hide from others, don't you? So the beginning of spiritual understanding is to not exist, to not even try, to not get behind it at all. When you find that simple quiet, that razor's edge, that you'll find yourself like a golden thread and a golden needle, that you'll restructure and move through this reality in a very refined way. And those of us who are very good at it, people don't even know we're here, don't know that we're doing that. If we talk to someone in public and we listen without reacting and let them feel free to be who they are, not about the game, not about the score, but about anything that moves in a human and then spiritual direction. And then from that we can grace our friend and loved ones with that beautiful presence that runs through us all day, every day. You can practice generating this absolute pure love like my teacher Susan does with her granddaughter. You just give absolute love and joy, especially to a beautiful young child that's still living on the other side. And they want to respect you, to do what you want, to care for you, to learn the little things of how to be a person in this world. You don't have to sneak around, you don't have to take, you don't have to harm, you don't have to fight. You can be very good in this world. And the more good that you are, the better person, the more you'll be trashed by the world. And we all know what that means. And some of us fight back in very devious ways and hidden ways out of fear, and you don't have to. If you understand this sense of absolute quietude that we're given of God, that is God, And to God we are God. In other words, there's a set of rules, like you have the novices rules. If you go, the basic rules of behavior in a nunnery or in any temple in the world, there are basic ways you learn. When Greg teaches his students, you're respectful, you're kind, you're caring, you also respect yourself. When I taught karate, the first rule was to not hurt anyone else, and the second rule was to not hurt yourself. And that's it. Because everyone understands there's been in traditional martial arts a complete spiritual sense of being grounded, and a Buddhist meditation where you get all your sensorial field to fall deep in your gut, and there's a quietude with it, and a wonder, and a joy, and you don't react. Like if you have Georgia sleeping or something, you don't react, you're just there. You can watch a child like that with such wondrous presence. She's asleep, you're not going to wake her, you're going to sit there. You could hear a pin drop. You're respecting the quiet, the place she came from, and that still is. In heaven, of heaven, for heaven. And if we can understand that, and all get back to that state and respect ourselves in that way when we're in meditation. When I'm working with people, I don't respect Robert, I'm just there. And whatever I got to do or go through or take, there are many, many wonderful, wonderful ways of doing this. And you don't know where it's going to go, but so you're completely free and open inside. Because you're completely free and open inside, so you can bring whoever the person is to the very next step in their need to re-identify with the Almighty. In heaven, and heaven is not there. It's here. It is. It's you. It's yours. It's not for someone else. The words in Proverbs are for you, for me, for us, from God. That we identify through being a more refined human spiritual being. And the basic thrust of this is that the world is an evil place. So it can confuse you in a very subtle way, very grotesque way. When you're in this, you're not in this world of this universe, when you're in that quiet, like I'm there so often in my life, I'm speaking for all of us that are spiritual, I know all of a sudden certain thought or an idea will come in and it will seem almost real. In other words, the dark side will get very subtle to hurt you if you're truly there, if you're really in God. So you don't trust the voices. It's like John said, to try the spirits, to test the spirits. In other words, you feel presences. These are very powerful spiritual beings in the days of Jesus Christ, the time of Moses, all the great ones, from the east, the west, the north, and the south. And they're all trying to express what's being said right now. If you're quiet, your consciousness is not distorted. It's like if you're 2 years old on the bedside praying to God, and you're always looking up. I know this for myself. It was like, I always look, where's God? But it's because it was that consciousness was and is God's. It just is. And the world will batter each of us in different ways to try to have us identify with the madness in some way. Again, in the East they call it Maya, the illusion. Point being, there is a condition of spiritual enlightenment, illumination, which is simply a sense of the divine kindness. And when you're there, it's so wonderful, so decent. He's so good. And if we get back to the idea of original innocence, we came into this world through this portal called birth. And we're on a trajectory. It doesn't matter about lives or past lives, because they're also material manifestations, aren't they? but you're here for a certain period of time, and so that happens because you could never quite comprehend how distorted this consciousness is, but we're here to change it, to end it forever and ever and ever. And every spiritual human being in the world feels what I'm saying this morning. I'm simply one of so many millions. Hear, O Israel, the Lord God is one. It's in consciousness, it's a simplicity. It's a profound truth, but it's lighter than the smallest atom, and purer than the midnight air, and as kind as a child's touch. And that's what we're talking about. So we have to set aside some time to be alone with God. And once we're there, we can be alone with God anywhere, in any conditions. You read many, many stories of great battles or calamity or destruction of the world where people were having visions of eternity. When you're that close to death, you have to consider death. And if you're spiritual, there is no difference between life and death. Pardon me, but speaking for all of us, I've always known if I lived or died, I would not change a hairline. I absolutely know that. Excuse me for talking about myself. I'm representing hundreds of millions of spiritual people. If I were dead right now, nothing would change. Whatever dead is. Make sense? Because you have to qualify everything. You, again, try the spirits, as John said, St. John. It's a spiritual universe we live in. God is a spirit. We worship God as a spiritual presence. God, go right to this point, worships us as a spiritual presence. We're part of God on this trajectory to dismantle the consciousness of the world that really doesn't exist. So right here in heaven, where we began this morning with the idea in Susan's book there that we appear to be in this world, but we're not in this universe. We appear to be to others. So this is the point we want to clarify. If you can get that little fine point there, that fine edge of thought, then your golden needle will finish the tapestry. And you'll hang it up in the heavens. And you'll be revered with it forever and ever. You're one of His, you're sent, you're pure, you're true. You're wondrous and kind and deep and caring. You are a remarkable being to put up with the horrors of this world. And it's like Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall and when he fell, he couldn't put the pieces back at all. The point is, great human beings put themselves back together. I'm begging you from my heart and soul to be a great human being and put yourself back together. It's not so hard. I will again speak for hundreds of millions of spiritual people. There's nothing that's happened to you that hasn't happened to me. 10,000 times over. Sometimes all day, every day. Used, misused, battered, beaten, disrupted in every imaginable way. And I'm just here. And I look into my friends' faces here, I know that this can be. We can do this. But this is the thing that needs work in our daily life. The other stuff will take care of itself once we stay deep in our stance, as Master G would say here, just to get deep in your stance. You're right here. It's a very powerful place to be. Your center of gravity. What they call the hara, it's just that your stomach you're completely grounded. And you're a presence. You're not a body. and no one can hurt you. The ancient samurai, when they were good, which is most of the time, was a very spiritual tradition from Bodhidharma, 1600 years ago, that moved throughout Asia, from India to China, throughout Japan and so forth. And so when it was sane and there was no egotism in it because you were the rich person who was the black belt, and so you became the teacher. But there's always been a mystic somewhere in the midst of us that has been the teacher in our neighborhood. It could be a grandmom. It could be certainly in my life, my grandma was very mystical, and yet her life was horrible. Escaped Russia in the first revolution, and somehow. And with all of her beauty and dignity and intelligence and genius, was a fine chef, and she also, I found out at one point, owned 4 trucks that moved alcohol from somewhere to the other place. But there was no way to make a living then for someone, a Jewish person at the time and place. So it's very funny when I found that out. The point is, we're here to live for our grandchildren, our father, our mother. When it says respect your father and mother in the Bible, it meant respect everyone. There's no reason to argue with anyone over anything. Yes, and then again, if there's an extraneous experience, there's a situation where you have to do this or that, the other, where you have to muscle through something, you do that. Like I say, the daily melange, the daily mediocrity, the rhythm of the earth, we do these things, but when you're in a spiritual state of awareness, you're not even there when you're doing anything. And I know this makes sense. And I know that if we practice these things or read the little book that Susan wrote, After Time, little divine work of art, I'm simply mentioning that today because if we read that, because I know it's never been written, you'll understand all the little things of day-to-day life in a way that, oh, you look at it, you don't have to go there. You don't have to put up with it. You don't have to eat anything. When you understand these things, then you'll put them aside. The socio-political atmosphere, your daily, anything in your life. It's there, you state it, okay, that's what it is. Then you can meditate without getting lost, because these are the different temptations that are stated in that book with with divine art. These are the right words for the right experiences that you'll have. It is nowhere else. It's quite wonderful to then see it and then you put it aside. You don't have to argue about anything in the world. So if you know that, you don't engage the dark side. And that is a beautiful freedom to have. Doesn't mean you won't be under attack from time to time. It means you will be. But you will achieve such goodness every day of your life. Doesn't matter where you're at. I've been around like the worst drug dealers in the world at the time in a room and everyone put their guns around. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? And because the big guy trusted me, it was quite interesting. I've been in the craziest circumstances, like what the hell am I doing here? But it was always to show me that when God moved me truly into the rough side, that we have to teach people, and we have to find out, we have to understand the way people really are in the world. And most people are trapped in a circumstance they fell into, they don't know how to get out of, and like my buddy Tim here just helps people in the worst ways. They've been incarcerated and so forth, and he helps them put their lives back together. There are a lot of beautiful people in prison with cancer, without cancer, without prison. It doesn't matter who or what the circumstance in your life is. If you understand what's being said today, you can first listen to someone, be with them. You can do, in a very secretive way, healings. In other words, we're all part of the divine. So when it's the right thing to be, my friend Kim Black, he had a friend with cancer, asked me to come, and he was like, went to the hospital, and I knew no one in the hospital wanted someone like me there at that moment, a woman dying of cancer. And so I had to do it under the worst conditions and make like I wasn't there. I'm holding the curtain, I'm looking like here while I'm transmitting all this presence and energy. And point is, you can do anything. You will do everything spiritual. You'll put your family back together, and something like that can take 3 years. It can take one moment. And when you understand you're not really here, then you can be in the place that a truly spiritual person is, where you can see the way someone's going to be 30 years in the future. You're going to live in a place where you'll see the true spiritual essence of everybody. It's quite wonderful. In other words, these are wonderful visions and spectacular, joyous moments where you'll feel in touch with, like I can see my mom and my dad and this gorgeous like bubble of blue soft light around Susan. It's just there are wonderful people in the world, and if we're very, very quiet and realize what they're going through, then I can always see my buddy Tim, who's the toughest street cop that ever lived, and but all he does is help people. Make sense? And if you're a bully on the streets, you're not going to be a bully again after meeting Father Tim here. I'm just joking with Tim, but he's the real thing, and it's wonderful to be a good guy, to be a wonderful mom, to have a friend. And beyond all this, to know that the actual God of the universe literally looks out from your eyes. And that's the place you'll get to swiftly after understanding one God. It's a consciousness. It's an openness, a purity, a simplicity, an absolute joy to be involved, to be caught up into the heavens with God the Father, that very, very nice person that lives inside Susan, Tim, all the great people of the world. And because life is so rough, we have to get very quiet to see who and what and when and where and what we can give at such time to anyone and everyone. And I know I can give everything to anyone at any time if it's necessary. And do I have to belabor the point there? So there's so many transmutations of consciousness you have to go through to heal things. So if you're practicing this holy and ancient art called meditation, reflection, contemplation, love, humanness, kindness, decency, you're involved in this, your world will be very worthwhile. And you'll hear that quiet voice, not off in the distance anymore, but you'll hear it when you speak. There's one God. Everything less than that pure consciousness is the not God. And there is a not God, but it's not God. There's so many ways to do this. Maybe get the book, Susan's book, After Time, has my name as the writer, Robert Rosenberg, but and the only reason to look at that is so you can see all the details of what goes on in our life and realize you don't have to react to it. You put it aside, and then you sit quietly. Make sense? One God, there's one you. You and God are one person. All those high states of awareness, consciousness, purity are not for someone else, they're yours. They're who you really are. We all feel this, we all know this. If you know it, then no matter where you are, what's happening, it will somehow activate these wondrous states, this beauteous sense of divine life, a divine light. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.